You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm George Cedarquist, joined this week by Oliver Camacho and Weston Williams. All right, in this episode, we go inside the huddle with stage director, cinematographer, and friend of the show, Marcus Shields, and get a peek behind the curtain of Ivo Van Hove's new-to-the-Met production of Don Giovanni, which opens next month. And then, speaking of the Met, we never talk about the Met, PJ gives his ringside report on Terence Blanchard's Champion. Plus, in the 2-minute drill, did Angela Gheorghiu actually have COVID, or was she poisoned by a double agent?
Dun, dun, dun.
Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Stitcher and on Spotify. You just click follow. On Apple Podcasts, you just hit the plus sign. Hey, send us a voice memo or even email us your hot takes, operaboxscore@gmail.com. You're going to get the OBS beer coaster for your pint. You're going to get the OBS lapel pin for your clothes, all for just sharing your own hot take. And right now, you're going to get Oliver Camacho.
You'll be so proud to wear that lapel pin. You'll never take it off, actually.
It's all I wear.
Weston Williams.
You're a never nude with the OBS lapel pin.
If you, yeah. And if you are nude, try not to wear the lapel pin, because that really is nasty. So, in Major League Baseball, as we talked about on the show a couple of weeks ago, the games are indeed faster now that there's this game clock. Average baseball times of games this season are down by 31 minutes, which is insane.
Wow.
That's like 20%.
That's almost 1 2-minute drill.
It is. It's almost 1 2-minute drill. It's a good unit of measurement. So get this. So there's less time to drink beer. So beer sales in many major league stadiums have now been moved to finish at the end of the 8th inning as opposed to the end of the 7th inning. And right here in Chicago in Wrigleyville, actually, guys, how would you describe Wrigleyville to folks who listen to the show who maybe have never been there?
Gosh.
Not sober?
Douchey comes to mind.
Yeah,
but also
adjectives.
it's sort of a tourist trap for white people who like to wear red, white, and blue.
Well, all the bars in Wrigleyville, of course, are now making Fistful of Dollars because the fans are drinking more there before the games, and then they're getting back to the bars sooner because the games are shorter.
Nice.
So Wrigleyville has essentially become a worse place. Let's talk some opera.
Huddle up. Let's go inside the huddle.
So if you listen to the Metropolitan Opera Saturday radio broadcast, you for sure have heard this name in the closing credits. But if you are a longtime fan of Opera Box Score, you'll also remember that Marcus Shields was our guest during the pandemic. He is in the middle of rehearsing Don Giovanni as an AD to Ivo Van Hove, and the run of Der Rosenkavalier, the Robert Carson production, is about to close, and he was on that revival direction team. There are many other credits that Marcus Shields has on his CV, and you can learn more about him at marcusshields.com. But we don't talk about people's CVs on this show. We talk about the hot goss in opera. And Marcus, welcome back to Opera Box Score.
Thank you, Oliver. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So just today, as we were recording this interview, the Met published some images of the rehearsal room, or actually, on what you call that space that they're in, of the artists getting together for Don Giovanni, and we see Peter Mattei and Federico Lombardi, and it's very exciting. And there's Ivo Van Hove, and there you are taking notes. I don't know if you saw that picture yet. That's been posted, but
No.
yeah, you're there in your very chic all black outfit with like a legal pad and a pencil. So it's great that like you are so close to the action. I'm very excited to see this production. I missed the Rosenkavalier HD because I had to work, but I also really wanted to see that, even though that production was the one that we saw with Renee Fleming and Alina Garancha. But I'm more excited to see the Ivo van Hove. What is it like working with what do you call him? Ivo? Do you call him Van Hove? Maestro Van Hove?
No, I call him Evo. It's amazing. He's been a hero of mine for a long time. I've loved and seen many of his productions that have come to New York and the United States. And he's been, for me, one of the stars in the pantheon of artist influence for as long as I've been a director and even before. But it's interesting because I've always loved his theater work. This is the first time I've engaged with something that he's done operatically. So, and actually he's not done so much operatically. This is he's done some things, but it's not the go-to thing that he does in his repertoire. So it's been a real privilege to be able to help him into the Met for the first time, help him get acclimated to the system, and just generally help create this production of Don Giovanni.
That's exactly what I was hoping you would say, because you sort of represent the Met in this circumstance. Like, he's coming in and he's making his debut, and you're the person with the institutional knowledge. So what are some of the things that you have to advise him on, and are there considerations for HD?
Well, I mean, the Met it's weird because when you introduced me, you said AD, and that's like an assistant director or something, or an associate director. I mean, it stands for a bunch of different things, and that job is it changes based on where you are. And at the Met, it's a completely unique job. It's not like any other house in the world, I believe. And it's certainly not like any other house in America. And so a lot of what my job is helping him understand the strange, totally insane way that the Met works, and the way that the Met rehearses and puts up productions for stage. And what that often means is when you're an AD at the Met, what we have on our team is about 20 or so freelance stage directors that are all really established and interesting directors in their own right, that come in and have to be mediators for the various departments in the Met, all of the technical department, all of the stage management department, costumes, set, etc. And you essentially sit in the middle of it all and lead any new team in the house through the rehearsal process onto stage. And that means a lot of times being on your feet in the room, doing all of the organizing, all of the minute by minute directing, especially when it involves chorus, especially when it involves the large forces that always assemble when you put something on stage at the Met. So in that sense, yeah, a person like Ivo, who has his own theater, who's worked all over the world, even with all that experience, comes in and is completely, him and his team have to completely relearn how to make a piece of theater in the context of the Met. And we sit there and do our best to help it go as smoothly as possible.
You have been on a number of projects that were broadcast in HD. I feel like that is maybe the main product that all of us experience now, since people of my generation even don't listen to the radio, let alone, the millennials and the Gen Zers, so if they're going to have contact with the Met, it will be through HD unless they go to the house. Are there some things that you have been able to glean about the Met and its relationship to that product and where it's going?
The HD specifically?
Yeah.
The HD is, it's wild because I think it's interesting that it is the thing that you experience most about the Met. To if you're just dealing with the day to day, it's sort of it's an annoying feature because very often it happens on the 6th or 7th show of a run. It's not the way you orient. You don't orient toward the HD except in maybe the way you think about the granular details of a production. For instance, in a production that wouldn't HD, you would let the scale of the house cover up some of the minor sins of like prettiness of a prop or something like that. You just let the stage be big. And that means that you don't have to be as insane about, as detail oriented about making sure that the note, the hand prop, the paper, the letter, whatever that a person is holding in their hand has an exact set of text that is matching what would be referenced in the narrative, that kind of thing, that if a HD camera happened to glide over while you're broadcasting a production, an audience member could easily see, that they may be able to see what the actual text is and know that it's not exactly what's lined up with what's being said. So there's just this level of attention to detail. That's also in the glassware. It's also in making sure just like every single thing is pristine in a way that you try to do in theater, but sometimes doesn't. You try to do in every production, but it sometimes just doesn't quite happen. But
by any chance, did you work on this Lucia?
I did. Yeah, that was what the end of my last year. Yeah.
I felt like there are so many props in that particular show, and they built a whole city for that one.
Yeah, that was like a film set. I mean, that was, again, I mean, you do it for different things. I mean, theater is made to be artificial and abstract in a different way than film is, and the HD sort of meets those two things in the middle, right? So it puts on film something that's meant to be theatrical. So you have to tilt the way you would make pieces of theater for a film set. And that production of Lucia in particular was even more film oriented because it had a lot of onstage diegetic video, I guess you would call it, like video that happened in the context of the production that was part of the design, on top of the fact that it was also HD'd out into the world, which was I managed the HD for that production, and that was a very challenging.
I was wondering, what if Nadine or Javier got sick? What would you guys do?
Well,
were there backup videos?
When we filmed everything, we did everything with their covers so that in the which was this one of these things that you just never realize that you have to figure out all the permutations of those things until you end up deep into the tech of the production, and you go, somebody remembers that in the case that somebody gets sick, we have to make sure that this cover does it with that principle, and that principle does it with that cover. So it's not just, it's not just 2 videos, it's 8 videos kind of thing.
Right. Well, I was noticing your fangirling, if I can use that word, about Peter Mattei. Had you heard Peter Mattei before this before this rehearsal process?
Yeah, I've loved Peter for so long. He's been one of the absolute vocal idols for me forever. And it's funny because I worked with him in Don Carlo in the fall too. And that was the first time I've seen him on the stage at the Met a long time, but I've never been in a rehearsal process with him and watched him go through his own workout. And that was kind of this truly fascinating experience of just watching an artist at the top of their game with the most gorgeous instrument that was every day coming into the room, working as hard as he could, thinking about singing every second, thinking about his performance, thinking about how to integrate the desires of the director and the acoustical realities of the set and the needs of the maestro. And I've never seen somebody work harder. And even just the other day, I mean, he had to do this HD segment as part of the broadcast for Rosenkavalier, and it was a 4-minute segment where he sings De Vieni alla Finestra, which he's sung for 20 years, 30 years, and he could sing in his sleep. Every time he sings it, it is the most beautiful time you've ever heard it sung. But it's sort of become this, madness thing for him, where he's always trying to turn his voice into a cello or make it have the perfect legato or figure out how to do this element of singing more beautifully, more perfectly than he's ever done it before. And it's just this striving for greatness that is incredible to behold. it's why I love that job. I mean, it's why, you know, it's why I like being at the Met, is because I love singers. I love watching singing. It is why I wanted to be a director, is because I like the weird, insane craft of singing, and I love watching the best people in the world do it.
So I'm so glad we got to this territory of this conversation sort of naturally, because I want to let the audience know that you trained as a singer and you still sing, but I know you first as a singer. And I think you're able to speak about singing in a way that maybe some of your peers can't. And I love how you talk about the rehearsal process. And there's something that you say on your artist statement on your website that really resonated with me about the experience of, or the privilege, I should say, of being in the rehearsal process with some of these artists and watching this thing that never really comes out the same way in the production, but there's like this thing that happens in rehearsal that is so special. And if you could just say more about that, I would love to hear. I would love the audience to hear it.
Yeah, I think I had an experience. I mean, rehearsal processes are strange things, and they're strange things at the Met. And I wrote that statement because I was really trying to put into words something that I was feeling about my own interests as a director, as a person who puts work on stage or tries to draw people's attention to certain aspects of performance and opera. And I remember I've had the experience many times of sitting through a rehearsal process at the Met in the room and really feeling enveloped by the piece, enveloped by the process, watching people figure out the various elements of it, figuring out their own performances. And then you gain this really up close relationship, sort of 5 feet away relationship to a group of people singing opera, especially singing grand opera, singing Puccini 10 feet away from you or something like that. And then you go up into the Met and into a 3,800 seat theater, this massive space. And it's like all of a sudden a piece of glass is put in front of the performance, where it becomes, rather than you being inside of it and being amongst it, it's like it's behind or underneath a cabinet that it's like it's in a exhibition and you're looking at it from this critical distance, and all of a sudden it's the full shape and you see the flaws and you see all these things. So I've been thinking a lot about that, and it's something I've always been interested in. And I also had this experience. The first show I ever did at the Met was a Madame Butterfly. And I remember after 2 weeks of rehearsal, the principals had gone through all of the staging. It's the Minghella production. It's a beautiful production. And they'd gone through all the staging, they'd built these relationships with one another, and they get to the Sitzprobe, and it happened in the orchestra room, which is this sizable room down in the basement of the Met, and the whole orchestra's there, and it's singers, and I was sitting amongst the orchestra, like next to the cello, and you're over there as the tenor, and you just are in it, in Butterfly, in this way that you go, and they play the piece, and you feel it 360 degrees around you. And it's something about opera that is so extraordinary. This isn't really answering the question, but it's part of the mechanism of how I've been thinking about it. And I mean, rehearsal is this really interesting thing. It's a hybrid between what people are aiming for in a final product and the messy, imperfect route they take to get there. And so a lot of times what you get is this combination of incredibly casual, in the course of a 3-hour rehearsal or a 6-hour rehearsal day, you'll get this mix of profound moments of focus and concentration and channeling of something. And it's mixed with this really casual, real life, easy, I don't know, it's the texture of the human that they are directly next to the God that they can be when they can channel their talent. And very often I've had the experience of, it's 11:37 a.m. and it's been a nightmare of a first half hour of rehearsal, and everything was disorganized for the start, and this crew didn't set the room properly. And so you come in and everything's scrambled and everybody's heart rate's up, and things finally settle, and you just get to a moment in a run of a sequence of the show, and all of a sudden one singer decides to sing their aria out and really take a moment to work something out for themselves. And nobody expects it to happen. Nobody's in the mindset of like, we're going to hear great, profound artistry right now. We're going to experience beautiful music. But it's like a singer at that level in a room of that level of skill and concentration, it can just stop your heart. I mean, it will bring you to tears in a second. And it's that surprise of never expecting to be moved in that way, and also never expecting to see somebody tap into something so truly beautiful, and it just hits you. And I've never experienced that watching a show. I mean, even in the best version of a show, I've never been able to access quite that level of special thing. And I've always had the thought that if you could get an audience to see that or experience it, somehow opera would become, or classical music would become, this undeniably necessary thing in that person's life. They would become addicted instantly, because there's nothing better in the world than experiencing that. And so a lot of the way that I think about performance is about how to make that happen. And I don't know how to do it. I mean, part of it has to do with figuring out how to treat rehearsal as the final product, or try to bring people into a process. And I'm certainly not the only person who's been thinking about that. A lot of stage directors have been thinking about that for years. But how do you get people to see exactly what that kind of thing is?
I
don't know if that makes
I
sense.
honestly know exactly what you're talking about, and I do wish that more people would get to have that experience.
But don't you think it's like, it might be the thing that I'm sure that working in restaurants there's a quality to being a part of something where there's a lot of artistry and a lot of high skill at the center of it, that somebody who's just coming in to experience it on a single night, one-off basis, you just don't have the frame of reference to really appreciate how special a certain thing is, because you don't know how high the level of consistency is every day, and you don't know when something ticks up to that extra special thing. I don't know exactly.
No, that's absolutely true. I mean, I worked in a fine dining restaurant that had tasting menus, and we'd see the same customers week in and week out ordering the same things, and they appreciate it, but like, it really does. There are times, like you said, like when everything is spot on, and you never know who's gonna get that experience. It could be somebody who saved all of their money, to be there that one night, and they receive this thing, and they're the ones who end up going on Yelp or whatever and writing a review of their experience that we can't even try to match that for somebody else, because it was just that special for them. We're running out of time, but I did want to hear about, since you're in a relationship with a singer, and you're watching her try to break through and have breakthroughs, and what that experience is like, and how maybe you can say something right now to those people who are singing and are waiting for the break about what that can mean, good or bad.
Yeah, I have a partner that is an extraordinary singer, and she is, in 2019, she was invited to the Mariinsky Theater as part of their ensemble, and a job like that means something that we don't really know in the United States, but it's akin to stability, and it's akin to a launching ramp into Europe, and it's a great opportunity. And as soon as she got there, it's a massive challenge to move from New York to Russia without speaking the language, and it's quite an intimidating thing. And as soon as she got there, about 2 months in, the war in Ukraine, the war broke out, and she had to flee. And of course, there are much more serious things to think about in that situation than the fate of one opera singer. But even though she had that opportunity, leaving that job meant that all of a sudden she had no work for a year, or she had to scramble as fast as she could. And she was able to quickly put things together. But essentially, she has spent the last year and a half trying as hard as she can to make a break into something else, to get another kind of job like that. And it is very, very hard to strike that again. And the thing that I've learned through observation, the thing that she's learned through experience, that we have learned through experience together, has something to do with the really feeling the message that I think gets said a lot when you set out on a career like this, that has to do with you should only do it if you're really truly and have to do it, because it's super hard and there's no no one deserves it, no one's entitled to it. And so if you want it, you have to stop feeling like somebody's going to give it to you, and you have to, by hook or by crook, get out there and make it happen for yourself. And a lot of that means that, for instance, she needed to get in front of so many different people to sing for them. It meant she had to fly to Europe multiple times. It meant she had to reverse engineer general directors' email addresses based on the formula that one person from their admin team, based on the email formula, and just cold emailing as many people. It just has to do with a tenacity and a willingness to get in front, mixed with an insane dedication to being as good as you can possibly be. And then you'll fail 100 times, and then maybe something will happen. And I think it just has to do with, I've watched her do that, and I've watched her now get another job that means that she's in a fest contract and going over to sing. And I think it's a beautiful thing to watch it happen, but it happened not because she was talented from the get. She's always been good, but the thing that made her have the incredible opportunity twice is this incredible dedication and willingness to do this really unpleasant amount of work.
Well, in our last few moments together, I'll say that the Met has had some PR things to deal with in the past couple of months, namely with Anna Netrebko winning that settlement, with Angela Georgiou's interview with Zachary Wolf, followed by her cancellation of her return, and then the whole Sonia Yoncheva and Norma, and then the Gunter Greusbach and the Ildar Odbratsikov. Are there any one of those stories that you feel comfortable just like pulling back the curtain and sharing what it's like on the inside?
Is the Gunter story about that he cursed on live television?
Oh no, I thought it was about like him not coming back. Like he
was reluctant to get a vaccine.
Oh, is that what it is? No, we don't know. There was a statement that was out there that's like he is not coming back in the near future,
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, I think that was because he just wasn't slated to be on the roster. Right. Yeah. I think that he is coming back. He certainly has done. He just did double Lohengrin and Baron Ox, so he's certainly been around a lot. And he did Don Carlo in the fall. I like Gunter a lot. He's a great guy.
So do I.
Yeah. Let me think. Yeah, there's some. I mean, all of those stories are probably what you expect them to be. I think the Angela Georgiou thing was really funny because right as we were starting, Giovanni, my colleague, Sarah Myers, was actually directing. She's mentioned in the New York Times article rather humorously, but she was directing Angela, getting her into this Tosca production. She was doing 2 performances in the midst of an ongoing run, which is never a very it's never a position that puts you on stage with a lot of experience. You sort of have to slot right in and go. But she came in and took up maximum amount of space. I mean, like made carpenters rebuild parts of the set, changed the way the jump happened. It was wild to hear the stories coming out of that room. And she also showed up without any interest of doing the production that, you know, the Met has purchased and the Met puts on, and she showed up and did her own staging and, you know, and created this massive fuss. And then the night before, she made the New York Times attended. You know, Zachary Wolf sat in the rehearsal room for these nightmare rehearsals where, you know, we as the spirits of the Met, us stage directors who make this stuff happen, you know, we're put in a strange position with one of these super divas where, you know, you are trying to accommodate the process of many different people. You're trying to accommodate the process of a conductor, a person like Matthew Polenzani and Zelko Lucic, who are there as well, you know, these very fancy professionals. And meanwhile, this other element comes in and is sort of a Tasmanian, you know, spinning force.
Yes. Secret police, by the way.
What's that?
Secret police. Oh,
Yeah.
maybe you didn't hear that story.
What is the story?
When she was a teenager, there's a story out there that she was like spying. She was like working for like the Romanian secret police. So,
well, the real like juice of it was that it came out on a Friday. She was supposed to do a Saturday matinee, and the New York Times article came out at 6 p.m. on a Friday.
Yeah,
and my colleague was, you know, head in hand, you know, just couldn't believe that they'd really sort of that Zachary Wolf faithfully described the experience in the rehearsal room. And Peter Gelb was in that story, not saying the most wonderful things. It was just a very wild little article. And then at 6:05, she cancels. And so it really felt personal. Like it felt like a stick in the eye. And maybe she had COVID, maybe she didn't. Who knows? I mean, it doesn't matter. But it was an episode in everybody's life. It was like a little chapter that in the book of the 2023 season. It will, you know, you'll flip past it and have a chuckle.
Well, the 2023 season continues with Don Giovanni, which opens in May, directed by Ivo van Hove, with assistance from many people, but assistance from our guest, Marcus Shields. Thank you for coming back to Opera Box Score.
You got it. Thank you for having me.
E vieni alla finestra, o mio tesoro, e vieni a consolare il pianto mio. Se neghi a me di dar qualche ristoro davanti alle occhi tuoi morire voglio. Tu cai la bocca dolce più che il miele, tu che il zucchero porti in mezzo il cuore. Non essere gioia mia con me crudele, lasciati almeno veder mio bell'amore.
For singers between 21 and 25 years old, get ready for the Giulio Gari vocal competition coming up in early May. Now in its 20th year, the foundation has given over $650,000 to many of opera's future stars. Past winners include Michelle Bradley, Janae Bridges, and Norman Garrett. You can apply on yaptracker.com or just visit giuliogari.org through the end of April. That's GIULIOGARI.org.
Yeah, you got something to say? Then yeah, all right, you can say something. This is Listener Mailbag.
2 entries into the listener mailbag this week. I consider that a bumper crop. 1 voice memo. We're going to start with PJ and a friend at the Met.
Hey, operaboxscore, this is PJ reporting from the Met. I am so excited to be here. This is the premiere at the Met, at least, of Champion by Terence Blanchard. We just saw him in his silver coat, puffy jacket. It is a scene going on right now at this opera house. It's between the first and second acts. I am here with a dear friend of mine, Mitchell. Mitchell has not been to the opera in more than 15 years. This is not a normal thing for him to do. We've just witnessed something spectacular. I think, Mitchell, what do you think, man?
I loved it. I'm a jazz fan, as you know, and I'm surprised how the story pulled me in. It was dramatic. You just wanted to know what was going to happen. The music just was superb. It just brought you into it. It brought the excitement up. It brought you up. It brought you down. And I expect to see you in a silver puffy jacket soon.
Hey, Mitchell, did you concentrate on the jazz music? Was the voice distracting? Because you are a true jazz fan. What did you have a jazz experience, do you think? Or was it some sort of hybrid? What did you hear?
It was less jazz than I thought, but as I pointed out to you during the opera, certain things would hit me as being, oh, that's a great riff. That's a great piece of music underneath that was building the tension or something. Loved that. But, you know, I think the thing about the music was that it just brought you in. They used it as a screenplay would use it. You cared about the story so much. I didn't realize that the story would be so good. It would be a great film.
It would be a great film. I would not be surprised if that happens. Let me just go quickly. It's Eric Owens, LaTanya Moore, Eric Green was making a debut. We also had Ryan Speedo Green as that young Emil, and also a person that I know, Opera Box Score, Helena Brown, a friend of mine, actually. This is her biggest role at the Met. Awesome lady, Helena Brown. That's it from the Met. It's PJ and my dear friend Mitchell reporting to you. We love you all.
I really love the sort of jazz perspective on this, just because it really is subtitled An Opera in Jazz, and the relationship between jazz and classical music has always fascinated me. I think that a lot of people, kind of somewhat dismissively talk about jazz and classical music as if it was like a brief sort of like crossover, cheap sort of entertainment era, but it really isn't. And Terence Blanchard has real jazz credentials, and it was really interesting to hear that even though it comes off in a more classical way, drawing you into the story, there are those riffs and stuff that are appealing to jazz people here and now, and that's always been really interesting to me.
I love the way that these two described what they saw. It is so brave to stage an opera and try and stage like a boxing fight or multiple boxing fights. It's extremely time consuming staging fight choreography, and they clearly were into that. Always good to hear from PJ and Mitchell. And then Kenny in Flint, Michigan says, excellent talk with Matthew Principe. I loved the live streaming and VR possibilities. He goes on, Detroit Opera's Fountain of Tears, one of their productions, was broadcast last weekend. It was very good. Some vocal mixing problems, but the music and energy was great. Good stuff happening in Detroit. You too can have good stuff happen to you when you send us a voice memo or even email us your
vocal
hot takes.
mixing. Is that like a wiki type of mixing?
That's exactly what it is. Yes. If you ever want to hear Oliver do that again, just write to us at operaboxscore.
Or if you don't want him to do that again, send us $100 and we'll make sure I edit that out next time.
What you don't get a choice about is the 2-minute drill, which is right now.
This just in, the 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
Finalists have been announced for the 2023 Met La Font competition. They include sopranos Teresa Perrotta and Meredith Wolgemuth, mezzo-sopranos Natalie Lewis and Sarah Saturnino, tenors Yun Tong Hang, Anthony Leon, and Sahel Salam, baritones Eleomar Coelho and David Wolf, and bass baritone Christian Simmons. Congratulations to all the semi-finalists. They will be accompanied by the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra for the final round this Sunday, and the OBS is betting that this year a countertenor will not win.
Oh, interesting. Central City Opera is planning on moving forward with its summer festival, even as bitter negotiations continue between the company and AGMA. The union has accused Central City of, quote, systematic union busting, baseless legal claims, and laughable assertions, while Central City has accused AGMA of purposeful deception, saying that all artists had been paid according to the contract and that any assertion to the contrary was, quote, a distraction tactic.
Arts Council England has announced that English National Opera will, in fact, receive £24 million of funding over the next 3 years, following months of public outcry in response to the drastic defunding of the company. The cash comes with strings attached. Equity, the union that represents opera choristers, said that while the extra money was helpful, quote, it's still being given on the condition that the company develop a primary base outside London, which will come at a huge cost to the workforce.
Malachi Bayo, the boy soprano who was heckled last fall in his Royal Opera House debut singing the role of Oberto in Handel's Alcina, has triumphed at the Royal Albert Hall, singing Mozart's Exultate Jubilate for a crowd of 5,000.
Conductor Vyacheslav Chernukovolych has been sacked by Odessa Opera after appearing in a picture with Yusuf Evazov in Azerbaijan. The Ukrainian opera company said that Chernukovolich's actions are unacceptable in light of the conflict with Russia. It is impossible for us to continue employment of those who do not hold a clear civic and patriotic position.
Documents published in Romania's Libertatea newspaper allege that soprano Angela Gheorghiu may have been an informant of Romania's Securitate, or secret police. The soprano seems to have been recruited in 1987, but was not very active in the position and did not denounce any of her colleagues to the organization. The article emphasizes that Gheorghiu most likely joined under duress or, quote, in a moment of weakness.
Opera de Lyon has canceled a month's worth of events this summer from July to August due to decreases in subsidies, the energy crisis, inflation, and the social crisis linked to the pension reform. Among the offerings to get the axe was On Purge Bébé, or We Purge the Baby, which we think is either a children's opera or a sequel to Elektra.
Crunching the numbers, the curtain and chandelier fell for the final time last week as The Phantom of the Opera closed on Broadway after more than 35 years. Since its opening in January of '88, the musical has played 13,981 performances to audience numbers of over 20 million, grossed over $1.3 billion in ticket sales, and sparked countless assertions from opera lovers that Phantom isn't actually an opera.
In trade news, England's Opera North has appointed Laura Canning as its new general director and CEO. She is currently director of artistic administration at Garsington Opera, a post she has held since 2015. She has also worked as an artistic administrator at Welsh National Opera and was the studio director for Houston Grand Opera.
On the disabled list, Maltese tenor Joseph Calleja has canceled his upcoming performances of La Traviata at the Bayerische Staatsoper. Calleja said on Twitter that he's having minor surgery to address acid reflux, and that he expects to fully recover by the end of May and is looking forward to his Bayreuth debut in June. Charles Castronovo and Freddie Di Tommaso will split Alfredo duty.
And on this day, April 17th, the first performances were Mozart's The Magic Flute in English. It was a U.S. premiere at Park Theater in New York City in 1833, and an opera by Sir Edward Gurman called Tom Jones, a comic opera in London in 1907. April 17th birthdays include German composer Johann David Heineken in 1683, English soprano Maggie Tate in 1888, Russian composer Nicholas Nabokov in 1903, Hungarian soprano and actress Marta Egert in 1912, French soprano Janine Michaud in 1914, Italian tenor Gianni Raimondi in 1923, Italian soprano Graziella Sciutti in 1927, German soprano Anja Cilia and German tenor Siegfried Jerusalem, both born in 1940. And on this day, April 17th in 1941, it is the birthday of Adolphus Hailstork. Happy birthday.
And that's your 2-minute drill.
Just a little bit of what the classic FM live audience was treated to at Royal Albert Hall when Malachi Bayo, age 13, sang alongside baritone Michael Spires and soprano Danielle Denise for this classic FM live event at the Royal Albert Hall. Good on him for coming back from that, being heckled.
Despicable act.
Yeah. Yeah, he showed you, jerk, jerk who's never allowed back into the theater.
Yeah. That jerk guy definitely didn't see Malachi do the thing at the Royal Albert Hall. The Central City Opera. So we are moving closer and closer to the summer season here. CCO clearly believes they are doing a season. AGMA has some questions, I think, is one way to put this politely, right? These two organizations are complete loggerheads. We're in this stage of like recrimination here. Here's what I can add to the conversation is that emails have crossed my desk from stage directors who are on the roster for CCO this summer and have said categorically they will not fulfill their contracts until this is resolved in AGMA's favor. So they are these directors, I'm not going to name names, I don't work with conjecture. These directors are adamant that AGMA's in the right and this thing has to be resolved. I predicted, in our New Year's predictions, I predicted there would not be a summer season at CCO, and I'm looking like a genius right now.
Does anybody call it CCO besides you?
It's just faster. I'm just such a busy guy. I can't. I need fewer syllables.
I think it's Central City. You know who needs fewer syllables is Angela Georgiou. That was a really weird transition. But you know what's
a bizarre transition? What a bizarre story. Yeah.
It is really bizarre because there was that story from Zachary Wolf, whatever it was a week ago, and then there were all the stories that riddle her career of her antics. Yeah. What if all that stuff is actually because she's living a double life?
What if?
And like the whole thing with the wig and with the cancellations and with the COVID is all because she was trying to avoid getting caught because she's actually a spy.
She's a femme fatale. I mean, you look at the book, right? The the photos. Crazy.
No, you're thinking of Sonia Yoncheva. You're conflating.
You're mixing them up.
Oh my gosh, I am mixing them up. I have femme fatales on the mind, George.
Yes, you have all those. George. It's because you have all those short syllables, like you don't have enough time in your brain because they're full of.
It's all acronyms for George. This was a genuinely really interesting article to read. I will say, I feel like I don't want to misconstrue what we discovered. And granted, we were going through Google Translate because none of us speak Romanian here on the podcast. So I do want to emphasize that based on my interpretation of the article in question, it seems like this is she's not being accused of like being like an active secret police agent. This happened when she was, still studying, and this happened very frequently where people like that were approached so they could get dirt on people in power and arts organizations, and there was only one thing she ever talked about as far as this researcher can tell, and it was a positive comment about another colleague, and that was it. So I don't want to like make it sound like we are alleging that she was, a criminal mastermind or like a Soviet sleeper agent. But like it was a bizarre story in a slew of bizarre stories about Georgiou over the past few weeks.
Here's another acronym for you: ENO, English National Opera. I mean, this is what they call a Pyrrhic victory, right? Because yes, they've got their 24 million in funding, which they should have. Look, I'm a huge fan of ENO and the work that they do, but to move out of London, it makes no sense. I've said this before. I'll say it again. So here's the list of cities, and if you're from England, this might have more meaning for you. The list of cities that they are apparently considering are Hull, Newcastle, Birmingham, Nottingham, Truro, and Manchester. All right. So here you go. Hull is a rough port town. Newcastle is way too far north. Birmingham has its own opera company. Nottingham is too small to pull an audience. Truro is all the way down in the southwest at the end of a peninsula, which no one goes to. And Manchester is the only one that maybe makes sense. I just don't know why you wouldn't go to Liverpool instead. The last option is the London borough of Croydon, which is in South London. Essentially, you know how the Bears are saying they're going to move to Arlington Heights? ENO moving to Croydon is the opera equivalent of the Bears moving to Arlington Heights. It's really great.
It's so true.
If you live in Arlington Heights or Croydon for your Bears or for your opera. For everybody else, it's dreadful and lousy because you have to try and like navigate outside of London. I do not understand the logic behind this.
In fairness, they're between a rock and a hard place. I'm glad Arts Council England has given a little bit of ground here. They're still losing money, don't get me wrong. But I think they did realize, if we're going to force them to like be completely displaced from their historic home, then we're going to have to give them something,
This was a difficult week to put the drill together, actually, because every time I hopped on Google and searched for opera, all that came up was Phantom of the Opera, in which I have
me too.
Approximately 0.0001% interest.
I mean, I'm the same way. Obviously, Matt isn't here to defend himself on that count. But for me, I feel like one of the most universal experiences an opera lover can have is trying to introduce this art form to someone new, and they inevitably say, "Oh, I've seen an opera." And I thought it was so appropriate when I was Googling that I was trying to Google the word opera, and all that came up was Phantom of the Opera. And I'm like, this is the way it should go out, being confused for an opera to the last. I think it's a little poetic in a way. I will say, beyond the jokes of, Phantom of the Opera is not an opera, I do think that it's a legitimately impressive feat. That many performances, that's many crazy. Ticket sales, that many viewers. Crazy. It's never been done before, and it's going to be a long time before someone does it again. The
only gross part is that all that money has gone to Andrew Lloyd Webber. That's
yeah. It's is he the Wagner of our time? Who knows? Who can say? But it is. I will say, regardless of how you feel about him, it was definitely a spectacle that really hit at the right time and had remarkable staying power. So, R.I.P. Phantom.
Oliver, let's have you put your money where your mouth is in terms of the Met finalists. You may or may not know anything about these up-and-coming singers, but give us a little tip here. Give us a betting tip. Who do we want to keep an eye out for, even if they don't win, for the future?
What I wanted to say is that Anthony Leon was the big winner at this year's Operalia. So it's not a surprise that here he is making an appearance in the Met competition. I'm sure he's great. And like, I have nothing to say about his artistry.
You know, just because you win the Kentucky Derby doesn't mean that you're going to win the Belmont Stakes or the Preakness.
Well, what I'm saying is that like, I feel like sometimes these adjudicators are a bit unoriginal. You know, they might say, oh, well, you know, they have that in their head that like he already has been recognized by, you know, so I have heard Yun Tong Han, actually. He was at Ravinia Festival this year as a fellow in the Staines Music Institute. Very good singer. But I don't know any of these other people. So, I know Meredith Wolgemuth. Great artist. She's very into art song. She actually she won an art song competition. Again, it's great to see, you know, people winning multiple competitions. I guess it just means that everybody agrees that they're that good. Anyway, no, but seriously, we love the Met competition. We think it's a great platform, a great springboard for people. Our own Arianus Boncone, who I think has been on OBS the most out of all of our friends of show. You know, he famously won, and look at where he is now. So, I mean, he already peaked when he was interviewed by us the day after.
Yeah, all been downhill since then.
Before we wrap up the drill, Joseph Kaleha having those...
I think you've said it every possible way, but the right way.
I think it's probably my acid reflux, which is causing the problems, just like that.
Yeah. That's all the femme fatales you got stuck in your head.
Oh my gosh, man. I'm never going to be able to sleep tonight.
So Joseph Kalea, you know, he's canceling his Traviata, and I guess he's moving on to singing Wagner roles. Was it Parsifal that he was scheduled for?
Parsifal.
What is going on? What is going on?
It's a big stage to fail on.
Good luck to him.
Let's wrap this show up.
Good call. Bad call. On Opera Box Score.
Kaleha.
Yeah.
Kaleha.
I think that's how it is. Now you've got me guessing, wondering if I've got it right.
Now I'm making you mess up. That's never good.
Kalea. I think it's Joseph Kalea.
Here's something you're not going to make a mistake on. Oliver, it's your good call or your bad call. Tell us what you got.
Yeah, I guess it was 2 weeks ago when Yeson Davies, when James Bowman passed away. Was it last week? I forget.
2 weeks ago,
Yeah. And I was saying how Yeson Davies was put a call to action out for stories about James Bowman. Gramophone magazine actually did a story about Yeson Davies and his tributes to James Bowman. It's very sweet. You can find it at Yeson Davies's Facebook professional page. It's Yeson Davies MBE countertenor. Anyway, we got the scoop on that one, but you know, now it's in print.
Weston Williams.
It's not opera, but I've really been vibing to the new album that just came out last week of John Dowland's Complete Lacrimae by Musical Humors featuring Thomas Dunford and Sons. It's just a really good... I've never been like a big John Dowland guy, even though my father literally went to school with Paul Odette, and like, you know, I grew up hearing him all the time because of that. But this is just a really, really good album. It's on the Alpha label. Everything they do is really cool. It's worth checking out.
Alpha's awesome.
Yeah.
That is it for this week's edition of America's Talk Radio Show about opera. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Send us a voice memo or email us your hot takes, operaboxscore@gmail.com. And you can find links to stuff we've talked about at our website, operaboxscore.com. And that is also where you can put your money where our collective mouths are. Give back to the OBS on our donate page. Your announcer is Norm Waddell. Your creative consultant is Oliver Camacho. And your audio editor is Weston Williams. For guest Marcus Shields, I'm George Cedarquist, asking you to continue the conversation about opera within earshot of the Romanian secret police. We're back with an all-new show next week when we reveal which sports stories would make great operas. Plus, you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more pronunciations of Don't Make Me Say It. Joseph Kaleha. Kaleha? Join us.